Beloved, life is full of seasons, times of joy and times of weeping, moments of strength and moments of weakness. But one thing remains unshaken: God is with you. Even when the news is bad, when the doctor gives a negative report, or when all hope seems lost, remember, your story is not over until God says it is. This message is for anyone who has ever felt like giving up, for anyone who has ever received bad news, and for anyone who wonders if God still hears prayer. Today, we will dive deep into the life of a man who was told by God himself that he would die, but instead of giving up, he turned his face to the wall and prayed. That man was King Hezekiah, and through his story, may you find hope, faith, and restoration. Let this story show you that prayer still changes things, that God still adds years, and that even when death knocks, God has the final word. The story of King Hezekiah. Full Bible narrative. With insights. King Hezekiah was one of the greatest kings to ever rule Judah. Unlike many of the kings before him, he chose to follow God wholeheartedly. In a time when idolatry was common and many kings had turned away from the God of Israel, Hezekiah stood out. He restored worship in the temple, tore down idols, and led the people back to righteousness. Hezekiah's righteousness. The Bible describes Hezekiah in 2 Kings 18 verses 5-6 as follows: He trusted in the Lord God of Israel, so that after him was none like him among all the kings of Judah, nor any that were before him. For he clave to the Lord, and departed not from following him, but kept his commandments. Hezekiah was not just a king, he was a man of deep conviction. He led the nation in spiritual reform. He reopened the temple that had been closed by his father Ahaz. He restored the Levites to their duties, and he re-established the Passover, which had been neglected for years. Because of Hezekiah's faithfulness, God was with him, and he prospered in all that he did. Yet, in the midst of all his faith and obedience, a day came when he received terrible news: the death sentence from God. In Isaiah 38 verse 1 and 2 Kings 20 verse 1, we read the chilling message that came to Hezekiah. In those days was Hezekiah sick unto death. And the prophet Isaiah the son of Amoz came unto him, and said unto him, Thus saith the Lord, Set thine house in order, for thou shalt die, and not live. Imagine that. A man who had served God faithfully, who had restored godliness in the nation, who had brought revival, was told by God himself through the prophet Isaiah that his time was up. It wasn't a false prophecy. It was a direct word from the Lord. You will die. Why would God say that? Why did God say Hezekiah would die? The Bible does not explicitly state the reason for Hezekiah's death sentence. However, we can consider some spiritual truths. 1. Human mortality. Even the righteous face death. Hezekiah had lived a life pleasing to God, but like every man, his body was still subject to sickness and mortality. 2. God's sovereignty. Sometimes God allows trials or even the threat of death not as punishment, but to reveal his glory in a greater way. 3. To reveal Hezekiah's heart. God already knew what Hezekiah would do. But this moment would become a testimony, not only to his people but to the generations after. Sometimes God allows crisis to draw out our faith. At that moment, Hezekiah had two choices: accept the word and prepare to die, or turn his face to the wall and pray. Hezekiah's response: prayer and tears. In 2 Kings 20 verses 2-3, we read, Then he turned his face to the wall, and prayed unto the Lord, saying, I beseech thee, O Lord, remember now how I have walked before thee in truth and with a perfect heart, and have done that which is good in thy sight. And Hezekiah wept sore. He turned his face to the wall, not to people, not to the physicians, not to the army or to wealth, but to God. That wall represented a personal space, a moment alone with God. He reminded God of his faithfulness, not in arrogance, but in sincerity. He poured out his tears. He didn't quote long verses. He simply cried and pleaded from the heart, God's mercy and the prophetic reversal. Before Isaiah had even left the palace courtyard, God spoke again. And it came to pass, afore Isaiah was gone out into the middle court, that the word of the Lord came to him, saying, Turn again, and tell Hezekiah the captain of my people, Thus saith the Lord, I have heard thy prayer, I have seen thy tears. Behold, I will heal thee. This is powerful. The God who said you shall surely die now says, I will heal you. God added 15 more years to his life. In 2 Kings 20 verse 6, And I will add unto thy days 15 years. What a turnaround. From death to life. From hopelessness to divine extension. This shows us that God responds to genuine, heartfelt prayer. Prayer does not manipulate God, but it does move him when it comes from a humble heart. The sign from heaven. Hezekiah asked for a sign to confirm the miracle. Isaiah gave him a choice. Should the shadow on the sundial move forward 10 degrees or backward 10 degrees? Hezekiah knew that moving forward would seem natural, so he asked for it to move backward. And it did. God literally moved time backward to confirm his promise. Hezekiah's mistake after recovery, though he received healing. Hezekiah was still human. He later made a mistake when he showed all the treasures of his house to messengers from Babylon. 2 Kings 20 verses 12 to 18. God sent Isaiah again to warn him that one day those treasures would be carried away, and his descendants would become servants in Babylon. This teaches us a crucial lesson. Even after God answers prayer, we must remain humble, discerning, and obedient. Blessings can become burdens if not handled wisely. Hezekiah's legacy. Despite his flaws, Hezekiah left a legacy of faith. He was remembered as a king who trusted in God, who led with integrity, and who prayed when it mattered most. Encouragement to you, the viewer, beloved. If God could give Hezekiah 15 more years after a death sentence, he can still turn your situation around. No matter what the doctors said, no matter what the enemy has declared over your life, God has the final say. Like Hezekiah, don't panic, pray. Turn your face to the wall. Shut out the voices of fear, doubt, and worry. Talk to God. Cry if you must. Remind him of his promises, and remember this: if you're sick, he is the healer. If you're weak, he is your strength. If you've failed, he is merciful. If time is against you, he can reverse the clock. Even when everything seems to point toward defeat, God still works miracles. It's not too late. You're not too far gone. If Hezekiah prayed and received an extension, you too can pray and receive restoration. If this story blessed you, inspired your faith, or reminded you that God still hears and answers prayer, then please, subscribe to this channel. We share powerful Bible stories, words of encouragement, and divine truths that can build your spirit every day. Leave a comment and let us know how God has moved in your life. And remember, no matter what the world says, God still has the final word. Stay strong, stay faithful, and keep praying.